from bench to bedside, accelerating R&D to clinical implementation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the warm intro, and we're so delighted all to be here. Fantastic intros already, so I think we can probably dive right into it. But for a little bit more context on this panel, we're going to share some really practical ways to move from R&D to clinical implementation faster. So thinking about the whole process and all the experience, challenges, tips that this amazing panel has. I myself am a clinician by background, so I've actually already learned a lot from this group of panelists on our intro calls. So really excited to learn more today on how to engage patients, how to engage clinicians, top tips for moving things faster along, and yeah, really excited to learn from this team. Just to dive into things, Allison, what would you say are the biggest challenges you're seeing right now getting from R&D to first clinical use?
That is a wonderful question, and I think we could start at the very beginning when we're mining ideas and ensuring that we have the right one. I love working with clinicians to do that really deep needs vetting, make sure that we understand the problem intimately in order to create a solution that is adoptable. So I think the hurdle then is leaping out of sort of the conceptual space and getting it into the hands of clinicians to get that immediate feedback. So I think that gap there is the hardest one, in my experience, to bridge. And some of the ways that we do that really effectively, so I'm from Houston, Texas, in the Texas Medical Center, and was at the Texas Heart Institute for 7 years and worked on translating innovation, translating innovation directly from that sort of bench side to bedside, or as we said at the Texas Heart Institute, bedside to bedside. And, you know, the ability for us to do product development inside of a hospital was what really helped us get from, you know, this wonderful concept to very rapid clinician feedback, so you can very quickly either kill an idea or iterate on it to improve it.
Amazing, amazing. And I know in our intro call we talked about, you mentioned about how important clinician involvement is, often riding the elevators with the clinicians, getting plenty of feedback from them as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And that's something that we'll touch on a little bit more further in the panel. I suppose, Edward, from your side as well, you work with a lot of different startups, a lot of med devices in development. Any challenges in particular you see, any common themes that founders are speaking to you about?
Yeah, great, thank you. So many companies decide to jump way too quickly into actually solving the problem, building the device, without actually proving out the physiology, proving out the technology. And fundamentally, a lot of people are so excited about solving the problem that they came up with at a tertiary center, they forget to actually go and test it out in the community, make sure it's a true problem, it's a true market. And then, you know, you can waste years and millions of dollars developing something that doesn't work. So the biggest thing that I did in my past when working in an incubator was we would come up, step back, okay, what exactly are we trying to do here? What are we trying to elicit? You know, it doesn't work with everything, but a lot of times you can beg, borrow, and steal effectively with the best physician in the world, go to an arbitrary geography and really work hard with adjunct therapies and kind of piecemeal together a solution that allows you to put together the proper specification to build the right device. And a lot of times that the adjunct therapy that you've tested out, the data from that is sufficient to raise a big enough round because they know it works. And now you have the roadmap to build. Jumping over that, I've had many times where companies will spend $5 to $10 million and then realize, oh, we have to go back to the drawing board completely because what we have is not sufficient.
Do you have any particular tips on how a founder can make sure that they're really understanding the problem, really kind of avoiding that kind of money waste and inefficiency? How can they kind of overcome that?
Yeah, so it's a paperwork exercise to start. So 95% of a company you can do without ever leaving the desk, without ever raising any money. So it's the classic biodesign problem. Let's figure out the regulatory, let's figure out the reimbursement, let's figure out the solution landscape, let's figure out what else is out there, let's figure out, is this a true problem? Go do interviews with clinicians, go do interviews with payers, make sure this not just that you can solve it, but someone will actually pay for it. So there's so much that you can do prior to ever even picking up a screwdriver. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So really important to do that kind of due diligence, make sure you've done a really deep dive and done your research before you're getting started. And one of the kind of common themes, obviously in the title of this, we're talking about getting to clinical implementation, and a big part of that is obviously clinician involvement, getting clinician buy-in. Obviously there can sometimes be some friction or difficulties, and it's really important to build good relationships with clinicians to kind of get that adoption and get them on board. I know, Homer, when we caught up yesterday, you talked about the importance of getting clinicians on board. Any kind of tips or tricks that have worked for you? Any kind of experience that you can share on how to do that well?
Yeah, sure. So clinicians don't have much time. Their value to a hospital system is patient care, surgical procedures, ensuring an input and an output of things that are happening. You have to value that time in a way where it's not going to be financial, it's going to be impact on that patient care. What are you adding to the healthcare dynamics that exist? What are you adding to a world that already exists for them? At Houston Methodist, it's an academic institution. So for us, it's can we publish together? And that publication of the findings of a scientific experiment or a clinical trial, animal study, can we go after non-dilutive funding together? We don't take equity or equity in exchange for service at Houston Methodist. It's literally a fee-for-service or a collaborative endeavor. So you're looking for opportunities where they can have an impact on innovation. And you also have to understand that there are different points of engagement. Some clinicians want to engage with the early R&D. They're very excited about developing a technology. Some of them just want to see the finish line of it impacting patient care. And if you don't understand where they are in that continuum, you may be speaking to the wrong type of person. And it's essential to kind of find where they want to be, where they are, how you can leverage that relationship and that institution to, again, find an impact that's going to benefit the patient.
Yeah, absolutely, Homer. That's really, really helpful. And a term you used yesterday, which I really liked, was clinical champions, I think. I think that was a great way to view it as in they're championing the process, really supporting you along. And it's a very collaborative process. Weronika, I know also you've been working with a lot of companies at HTD Health. Any pointers or good practice that you've seen that helps get clinicians on board and get their support?
Definitely. So I will echo also what you, Omar, said, that clinicians are super busy, and it's very important to actually also understand their point of view, because they think about how to improve patient outcomes, how to improve their clinical, let's say, work. And I come from the technology side. We focus on software design and development. So it's all about actually bridging and connecting their clinical insights with the technology, and then you can really make something great. Because they will not tell you, hey, let's build the software that will automate data entry, but they will tell you, I want to spend more time with my patients. I want to have more time to actually help them. Which then you have to figure out, okay, how to translate that need into the technology, and then you can really help out patients. The other thing I would also say that clinicians are busy, so they have a lot of things happening, and they have a lot of, let's say, platforms that they are already doing, and we are creating great technologies, but it's very important to also keep in mind that the technology that we are building must fit into clinician workflow, cannot add additional burden, because again, they don't have time. So if that will be additional thing that they would have to log into or spend time on, might be hard with adoption. So it's also important to, what we do is we work with clinicians early on, from the design phase, to gather their feedback, to work hand in hand as partners together, because then you can really build something meaningful for them.
I really, really like that. I think, those kind of two words there, champions and partners, are a really good way to look at that relationship. And would you say, Weronika, it's important to involve clinicians the whole way through, or are there points where maybe you don't need their input as much?
Because they're busy, again. I think it depends on the clinician. So because we've worked with so many different ones, and sometimes we had our partners, clinicians, that they wanted to be involved like the whole way. Sometimes they said, I will tell you, in the beginning, like what is my vision, what I need, and then please work with my team. But I would love to be involved, like let's say, have with you like bi-weekly calls or something like that. So I do think it depends on also a person. But from my personal point of view, I would love to have them being involved the whole way, from early on to all the way till the end.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I obviously can comment more from like the digital health side and on the app side, and the importance of always involving users in an iterative way, getting user feedback and really co-building and co-creating together. I think that's really, really important. Just shifting gears slightly, thinking a little bit about fundraising, and often, if you're building a medical device, if you're in this space, biotech, health tech, a lot of capital is involved. It's expensive. We were just talking about rent prices in New York before we went on stage, and it's a lot. So Allison, I know currently you're fundraising at the minute. How are you finding the fundraising climate right now? Any kind of advice or pointers you can give? And I know you mentioned as well about dilutive and non-dilutive funding, so would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever easy to fundraise, but coming from the US as an American company, we are uniquely challenged in this moment due to a lot of economic uncertainty, and I'm seeing that play out across, not just my, fundraising round, but others, that it's an extra layer to have to peel back. I see that a lot of the investors are able to raise their rounds, which is great. So, I think there will still be dry powder, obviously, like, Ed will be able to talk to that more. But in getting our technology out, like you said, it takes so much capital, it takes so much time. Leveraging the non-dilutive funding at the very beginning is really, really helpful, especially when you're still really vetting that need. Like, we're still really trying to understand the problem, still really trying to understand, the treatment, like what is the biology, what is the physiology. All of that is so early stage that you aren't going to be able to get VCs involved. Angel offices are probably even going to be, a little bit cautious. And so that really early stage funding is mostly for me and the companies that we've worked on spinning out has been government grants. And we had a really nice CEO session yesterday, and we got to hear all about everyone's non-dilutive funding journey and the different opportunities across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, as well as Australia, and how to leverage those. And I think that's really critical in de-risking these very early stage technologies so that you can then go and pitch them to the family offices, the angels, and eventually the VCs. So I think, like we said, building up that early preclinical data set is really valuable, but time consuming. So get as much non-dilutive capital as possible so that by the time you reach some sort of value inflection point, you are not, diluted out of your cap table before you even get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really love that. Any particular groups, resources, anything that you could recommend for a founder who is looking for non-dilutive routes as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, this is going to be speaking from a very American perspective, but the NSF and NIH both have SBIR programs, the Small Business Innovation, and STTR programs, sort of the sister funding of that, which is very popular whenever you're working out of an institution as well. You get a little bit more leeway in terms of full ownership of the company. Then we also have a relatively new funding mechanism called ARPA-H. It's our new healthcare fund, very much framed on DARPA, which is our defense fund that was used to accelerate innovation in the Department of Defense. So now we're able to accelerate healthcare innovations using the same model. It's like build fast, kill fast model. And they're giving out very large sums of money, anything from 1.5 to, 40, $50 million. And so you can build an entire product using some of these funds. Additionally, there are other funds more specific to different systems. Like we have the American Heart Association. There's a number of diabetes associations. We have lots of infrastructure around neurotech and funding that through government funds. In Texas, we just approved $3 billion for neurotech development. And so that's going to be a huge boost. We have another multi-billion-dollar fund around cancer in Texas. And so not only are there country-specific, but also state-specific funding that can be leveraged depending on where you are. Again, I am from Houston, and so I'm most read up on all of the funding coming out of Texas. But look at your state-specific funding, look at national funding, and then also the international partnerships as well. Is there someone that you can partner with in the EU? Is there someone you can partner with in Australia? Get creative, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eddie, you see a lot of, pitches. You see a lot of companies trying to raise money. Anything in particular that is a key marker of success for you? Things that you're looking for when you're looking at pitches?
Yeah, you see quite a variety, unfortunately. People tend to spend too much time on marketing ploys and not really getting, investors don't have that much time. And so really need to focus on what can drive conviction, which is, okay, what are your competitors? What are they doing? If you say there's no competitors, that's a red flag. There's always a competitor. It may not be exactly what you're doing, but there's definitely someone out there that has pieces that can then shift them around the table to then go directly against you. And we also need to ensure that there's a way for this to actually get through regulatory. If you say it's a PMA, but you don't actually talk about what the trial is going to look like or anything else, and you haven't spoken with the FDA to negotiate that, we don't know what your next round is going to look like. So there's a lot of uncertainty in how much money we have to leave for the next raise. So in general, it's really just, you need to vet the entirety of the pitch deck. It can't just be one thing or the other. We tend to see a lot of the early founders really focus on the physiology or focus on the technology and then totally forget the rest. And so when we look at that, it's much easier for us to say no than it is for us to say yes. And so we can say no based on, just the team sometimes. We can say no based on someone's slide being, basically saying that they're 1% less effective than someone else. And so we really need to be sure that these companies have the ability and wherewithal to drive forward and understand all aspects of the company, not just one.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it's very, competitive. You have to make sure that you really have, all your I's dotted, all your T's crossed, definitely. And Homer, I know yesterday when we caught up, you were speaking about you're working with a lot of companies as well, getting involved and supporting them. Have you seen anything from the fundraising side? Any pointers that you could also share or any tips?
Yeah, I think you have to focus on reaching milestones and finding the right collaborative partners that are going to bring value to the table. And it's not just an institution's name, but really getting to the work of what it is that you need to do to reach that milestone, generate that evidence, and hit that inflection point where the value of what you brought to the table has increased significantly. And to me, working at an institution where you have access to preclinical models, working with an institution where you have access to clinical trials, it's finding access. It's finding the right type of access that understands where you are, where you need to go. As Ed mentioned, everyone has a slide deck that tells me what the finish line is for commercialization. Well, that's fantastic. My question is, what do you need to do next? What's the very next thing that you need to do to keep your company alive? Because your runway is limited by the amount that you have for the next year, maybe year and a half. What can we do together that's going to build that? And in some instances, why don't we build that in a non-dilutive fashion where you're not giving up equity? Because at some point, when you do have to give up that equity, that value is going to be significantly higher, and you're going to have a better approach. So the big tip is really just find the right types of partnerships that have the mechanisms to allow you to work quickly, to be efficient in the things that you're doing, to accelerate and be very rapid in the effects of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, really, really great point. And Veronika, obviously we've heard a lot from like the US side and the US perspective, but also keen to hear what you're seeing on the European side. Any kind of particular challenges or anything that you're seeing being done well in the European space?
Sure, and we actually work with both European and US startups and organizations. So what I would say, it's very good about the runway, right? Think about like how much money do you have for like, if you have enough for the next 8 months or 1 year. I do think it's the right time to start, fundraising. The earlier you start, the better. Like always when I talk with startups and we have like different conversations, and I'm like, you're fundraising? Yeah, always, always. So it's always fun. So always fundraising. But I also think like this kind of events like MedTech World or other conferences is great because you can have a conversation with your peers, but also you can meet investor, at the bar or at the breakfast, and you never know what will happen in 6 months or a year. Maybe that investor that you will meet tonight will be your investor. So I think going also to these industry events, it's crucial. But of course, do the homework before. And if they are investors that you would love to talk to, look how they look, and find them on the floor. That's what I would do if I would be fundraising.
Thank you. You just read my playbook. Exactly.
I love that. So we really talked about actually a lot of the importance of relationships here too. So we've talked about clinician relationships, investor relationships, and also a very important part of anything in healthcare, anything in building anything clinical is the end user. Typically, that could be the clinician, but also it can be a patient who'll be using the product in some way or is impacted by use of the product in some way. And I suppose, Homer, we did talk about this as well. What approaches would you say you can use to involve patients and the end users that are really effective but also don't slow progress? So efficient ways to involve patients and get their feedback and get them involved.
That's an excellent question. So the question of who is using my technology to be implemented in either healthcare or an at-home setting, and the reality is you have to do it early and you have to do it often. You can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of headaches going through regulatory burdens and develop something that maybe if you didn't get the right type of feedback as you were iterating, could be a very expensive paperweight. Maybe you've created something that has 15 additional steps for some healthcare provider that doesn't have the time to implement those steps because they've been doing very specific things in their specialty for years, decades, you name it. So you have to look at adherence, adoption, and the only way that you get around that theme is by having those individuals engage in the development of your technology in what we call the user experience, maybe the human factors element, for those that are familiar with the field. The goal is get that device, get that technology into the hands of the users and see what they're doing with it. Make sure that they don't make mistakes in its use, make sure that they can deploy it without having any problems, and it's going to benefit you. At the end of the day, you don't want to develop that very expensive paperweight. You want to have something that is going to be accepted, and patients are a user population. There are a lot of technology companies that develop something where they think that it's just going to be the healthcare providers. You don't take into consideration this technology is being developed for the patient. You are addressing a problem that exists in their world to make their life a little bit better, or in some scenarios, just outright bring something that didn't exist for them in the past. So you have to take that perspective into consideration, especially with technology today that is based upon wearables or at-home setting technologies. So work with institutions that can help you do that type of thing. Work with individuals in the patient setting. Find a patient advocate if you don't have a patient advocate for your technology. You should, as a company, have some type of person that is going through or has gone through what you've gone through.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Homer, because I think even, for example, at Flo, obviously slightly different, but often we refer to our people who are using our product as users. And I think it is really important to remember that these are patients, these are real people behind the products that we're building. It's very easy to get caught up in the process and the milestones, but it is still important to think about the safety and the end outcomes, the clinical outcomes at the end. Weronika, any pointers from you on how to engage patients well? I know Homer has already raised some really good ideas about patient advocates and other approaches, but anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, all great points again, but what we do, because again, we are designing this technology and building it, so we want to, as we want to involve clinicians early on, we want to involve patients very early on as well. So a couple of examples, like in the neurology space or cardiology space, we do a lot of work there. So or patient even dialysis, there are so many like different spaces, and patients are also different, so their needs are different. So every time when we start a project, we actually go on site, that we call a kind of like a workshop, and we will have interviews with patients, and we will actually go to dialysis unit, we'll go to the OR, and we will actually see how clinicians interact with patients, how patients, just go there to the hospital, what they do, and how our technology would then help. Because sometimes, like human factors, for example, this is crucial to see the surrounding. If you are designing a platform for a patient, to support them during kidney dialysis, it will be helpful for you to actually go there, see the patient, ask the questions before, ask the question after, to actually understand their needs, because you might not even think about something that it's so, like obvious for them. So definitely understanding and seeing their environment is very important, and asking the right questions for patients. And also having them involved from early on, because then they will be really engaged, because one of the main challenges is patient engagement. So if you don't involve patients early on, the engagement will not be high. So,
sorry, hello? Okay. I'd love to add a point, because I think you highlighted something that's really important. We all kind of talked about it in our warm-up call of, being in the environment and actually observing what patients, clinicians, whatever the user is actually doing and actually needing, because what they say and report is probably not actually what is happening. You have to really be there to see the process. I've worked very closely with clinicians for a long time, and almost probably 99% of the time they tell me what they need, and it turns out that is not it at all. Like they're unreliable reporters of their own experience. Again, like you said, they're just like too in it. And so being there to actually observe what is happening so that you can then say, like, oh, this feature is actually unimportant. This other feature is something we have to include. And so I think getting that not only at the beginning, but iteratively as you go, is really helpful. And that's where having these partnerships that Homer keeps talking about are so important. Being able to do that quickly so that you aren't, again, wasting runway or you aren't paying for unnecessary iterations, so that you can get to your milestone quicker.
If I can chime in really quickly, also consider the user populations in terms of their experience. I work at a high-level institution where everyone is a high-level performer, sometimes the KOL in their respective field. You want to get the feedback of everyone in community hospitals, clinics, because ideally those high performers aren't necessarily going to have a major impact by the technology you're developing. It's the people that are working at the beginning of their career in community settings that may not have the technical skill. Your technology is made to bridge a gap. And when you can figure out what the value of that bridge is for that specific population of users, there's a huge value in that.
I'll add one thing there. So as an engineer background, so luckily the FDA, they forced us to do this. We forced us to do it for CE mark, ISO 62366, 601-1-6. These standards are exactly what you guys are talking about here, where the human factors are so critical, where you do formative and summative usability testing, and you do it in a serial fashion with the end users, both the patient and the clinician, and that really forces us to ensure that there's no use errors coming from our design, and that also allows us to iterate and make sure that it's a streamlined process, whether it's a surgical device or it's a wearable. Even if it's not required, I highly recommend looking at the human factors file from the FDA. It's effectively a roadmap on how to design a good medical device that can fit into any scenario. It takes a lot of time. Formative and summative usability testing takes a lot of time and money because it's very difficult to organize, and it's hundreds of pages of work in the report, but it's well worth the time to make sure that when the rubber meets the road, your device does not fail. And I've seen that happen quite a bit, unfortunately. So highly recommend looking at those files.
Amazing, Eddie. Thank you for that. That's really helpful, like tangible advice, and I love that actually throughout it's been really actionable pieces of advice. I suppose in terms of our audience listening, I don't know exactly what everyone is and what their background is, but I presume we probably have a mix of innovators, founders, clinicians who are listening in on this. And my ask just to the panelists as we kind of begin to wrap things up, what would be one tip that you would give as a takeaway tip for people in the audience on how something they could do this month that will hopefully save them 90 days or a significant period of time in their journey? I know we've already given a lot of advice, so if there's anything else you could think of.
If you want exactly 90 days to the T, make sure that you go and submit a Q-sub as early as possible with the FDA, because that forces, so it's not so much that you're speaking with the FDA, it's all the work that you do to approach it, where you really have to sit and think through, okay, what is it we're doing? What data do we need? What's our bench testing? Because you can't assume that. That's one of the biggest issues I've seen with companies. They assume these things. They basically go and file the 510K or file whatever, and they basically get pushback and say, hey, you've completely missed the mark. This is not your predicate. Go back and try again. And by the way, you need, it's now a de novo, and you need clinical data. So 90 days to 180 days, there you go. Go submit, talk to regulatory as quickly as possible and early as possible, and do it on a repeat. Make sure you have alignment. Make sure it's not binding. That's critical. Make sure it's not binding. You might have to retract a couple times, but ensure that you have a phenomenal roadmap from the get-go. And this can be, as we said, this can be a paperwork exercise. You do not need capital on the table to do this.
Yeah, I'll just circle back on that. That's exactly it. Know your roadmap. Know what you need to navigate. I wouldn't take one step in one direction without understanding what it is that I need to do. And at the end of the day, you don't make mistakes that could cost you time and money. I had a scenario where a technology company was going to run a GLP preclinical study for FDA clearance into the market. And they had a consultant of 15 years in FDA that told them they needed to do this. I should have asked them, have you talked to the FDA? Instead, I said, you know what, 15 years, that makes sense. Go ahead and do it. We ran the study. The data was fantastic. We go to the FDA loves the data, but they say, it's kind of unfortunate. You're going to have to run this a little longer. So $1 million later and a year later, we get the technology into the FDA, and obviously it gains clearance. But that's the point. Save yourself the time, the money, and the effort, and have those discussions with regulatory bodies that want to see your technology reach the market just as much as you do, but want to see that threshold of safety above everything.
Yeah, I think in terms of regulatory, having those early conversations has been really helpful for me as a CEO because we understood our pathway. We were able to leverage preclinical data that was well planned, well mapped out, and get breakthrough designation just using our preclinical models. And we were able to do that on the first shot during a government shutdown. Like, just having a good plan and executing on it is great. I would also add that pressure testing any idea as quickly as possible and making a decision is critical. Like, hemming and hawing just wastes time, wastes capital, and it pushes out all of your timelines. So I'm a big fan of killing early and killing fast.
I love it. I love what you... I love what you all just said, so I will just summarize maybe, and also just, definitely regulatory strategy from day zero, reimbursement, because somebody has to also pay for that. And again, because I come from the technology side, involve patients and clinicians early on, because that can also help you save money and save you time, because designing something not correctly that will not be used and then redesigning that from scratch is no fun and not cheap. So I would say, regulatory reimbursement and your end users from day zero.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And perfect on time. We've got 6 seconds left. But no, thank you all so much. Some really, really great experience, feedback, tips. I hope you all find it helpful. We didn't have time for Q&A, but do feel free to catch any of us. We're very happy to speak to any of you. And thank you so much for your attention.